All right, stand by, stand by. Now, if you're just joining us, why am I doing this countdown? Well, maybe you can't hear my voice, and I'm doing everything I can to give you the opportunity to turn up the volume. It's Alex Mandossian here. This is a Facebook Live, thanks to Mark Zuckerberg and his team, Facebook Live virtual book tour worldwide of Give. Now, what's a virtual book tour? A virtual book tour is where an author doesn't just get to explain the book, but gets into the backstory of the book. What was inspired to start writing the book? Writing books are tough. What happened in certain chapters? Where should you start reading the book? What specific chapters are important? Just so you get past the first 20 pages where most readers don't. So instead of going from bookstore to bookstore to bookstore and do book signings, and most people bring their books, so you don't even sell books there. That's exhausting. You live out of suitcases. We do a virtual book tour where you have one Facebook Live, thanks to Facebook, and it is shared on your Facebook pages. So if you want to share this with your group, with your fan page, with your profile page, all you do is there's a button down there. It's 5 magic letters. It's called share. And one share is worth 100 comments and probably 1,000 props, which are thumbs up and loves, right? So do that. Share it with your tribe if you believe that we're worthy of your tribe's devotion. Now, my name is Alex Mandossian. I go back to 1995 in digital marketing, which makes me BG, before Google. And this event is not about me. This event is about you. And the book and the title is a verb. It's called give. Now, that's an ordinary word. You hear it a lot. There's givers and there's takers, right? But there's a special way to give. And when you give on Facebook, not just Facebook Live, but on Facebook through paid and organic traffic that can come your way faster, better, and easier. So we'll go over the book and the promise and why it's called Give. But the author is a friend of mine, and he was first introduced to me by another good friend who's a high-performance coach. His name is Todd Herman. And I remember I was speaking to our author today in my car in the garage of my apartment complex, and he gave me about 45 minutes of his time, not knowing who I was and my former partner at the time. And in those 45 minutes, I learned more about Facebook ads and how to do a launch, because that's just one way you can utilize Facebook ads. He allowed Todd to have a $3.5 million launch, probably more. And so I was just, I was captivated. And I'm a professional speaker, but he was, first time we ever talked, he was just very generous. He was a giver. And this is several years ago. Then I saw him at a massive event called Traffic and Conversion that's put on by friends of mine, Ryan Dice and Perry Belcher, Roland Fraser. And he was in a breakout session, but this breakout session had over 600 people in the room. And he gave away a template that I downloaded as a speaker on stage. It was a 1-hour talk, and I keep that thing laminated because it's all I needed to know about Facebook. There are a lot of Facebook experts, there are a lot of Facebook strategists and advertisers, but my guest is acknowledged as the world's #1 Facebook strategist. We'll talk about why Facebook, we'll talk about why my guest is that strategist, and we'll also talk about why now is the time. No matter what you've heard about Facebook, no matter where you think it's going, advertising rates are going up, no matter what you've heard, put that bias aside and give us 40 minutes, because your time is valuable, ours is as well. Type in where you are hanging out from, and we will be typing back. We have a few people who will be engaging with you in the chat, so please do that as we go along. So give us your name and where you're hanging out from. I'm Alex Mandossian, and I'm hanging out from Marin County, California, which is Northern California. Now, oddly enough, many people think they have to be a marketing expert to do well on Facebook. You don't. Many people think you need to be technology-oriented to be good on Facebook. You don't. Many people think that you need to be really good at social media and an extrovert to be on Facebook. You don't. Because my guest, the author of the book, was a pastor. He's a former pastor. And if you know the word pastor, P-A-S-T-O-R, then it comes from the Latin noun pastor. And pastor really means to shepherd. And that's derived from another word, which is a verb called pascere. Pascere. How's my accent? And pascere means to lead to pasture or to cause to eat, like communion, or to set grazing. Now, in many types of denominations within the Christian tradition, this is not a religious presentation, but in the Christian tradition, pastors are known to be shepherds. And a shepherd doesn't manipulate in order to have a herd go a specific direction. A shepherd doesn't force the herd to go in a specific direction. A shepherd simply borrows their presence, and then without touching, many times the good ones, then that herd goes in a specific direction. Now, we're not talking about sheep, we're talking about people. And from the context of pastors and, let's say, church or synagogue or mosque, you don't have a herd. You have congregations, which another friend of mine, he used to be a student, now he's my teacher, Russell Brunson, he talks about it in his books. And you have congregations of people. Now, a congregation isn't religious. A congregation on Facebook is a lookalike audience. You want to get as many of those as possible so that they congregate. If you have people in your members list and they're there, man, that's a lookalike audience opportunity, because Facebook will allow you to do it and you don't even have to do the shepherding. They do that. Now, I believe that the world's leading Facebook strategist, and I'm talking about Nicholas Kusmich, we'll call him Nich, he is a digital pastor, and you can get all of his execution intelligence today for 99 cents. For 99 cents on Amazon. But I'm going to ask you to watch and wait. Get rid of Facebook right now. If you're on this mobile phone, get rid of any texts that come in, anything that's detracting your attention. Give us 40 minutes, 45 maybe, and we will show you the ultimate guide to Facebook advertising through giving. Now, you may say, yeah, Alex, I know, I'm a giver. It's who you give to. So keep giving, but when you find the right audience, they will give back. If you give to takers, it's like planting seeds on concrete. It's not going to grow. There's no law of karma working for you there, right? There's no cause and effect. But if you give to the right people, if you give to the right audience on Facebook, that's the key. When you find that sweet spot, they will give back, and then you start expanding. So I want you to welcome, and just type it in. Say, hey, Nich, just say N-I-C, because that's the way he spells it, N-I-C. Say, hey, Nich. So, Nich, you're on the big screen, buddy. Let's just dive in. I'm not going to focus on your background because it's not about you. It's about them.
Absolutely.
And they can check you out on your website, nicholaskusmich.com. But I want to know the specific incident of how this book came to be. Where were you? What happened? What were the triggers to get this book written? Go for it.
Yeah, I love that question, and thank you for asking, and thank you for that introduction. That was marvelous, and I'm actually seeing myself in a brand new light right now, and actually this might spawn on to how I might approach a few things in the future, but I don't think there's one specific instance as much as it was a combination of the aligning of the stars that actually happened over an extended period of time. As an educator, as someone who tries to disseminate information to people in a way that kind of makes sense, it was always in the back of my mind, like most entrepreneurs, to write a book. The big question was how, when, would it be me who writes it? Like, what was this whole process? I knew I wanted to, I just didn't know when or how. And so it was like one of those things you just kind of take and you say, I will get there one day. You put it on the back of the shelf and you just hope for the best. And then years went by and the thought of it continued to grow. But now all of a sudden I had students, and the more I taught this stuff, the more people follow me, and the more the questions started to come up. Well, when, Nich, are you going to write a book? And my question was always someday. As most of us always know, someday never really comes around unless you put some intention behind it. But it was someday because, again, I was stuck with this idea of how do I do it? Do I have the time? All these like intricate details of making this whole thing work. I'm just going to kind of push that off to the side. And then I came across one of our mutual friends, and I remember this day very specifically. I was at a Genius Network annual event of all places. It was lunchtime on day one, and we're sitting outside in the hot Arizona heat, and the person who sat beside me just happened to be a gentleman by the name of Tucker Max. Tucker Max at the time, I mean, he's a 3-time New York Times bestselling author. And he had started this company called Book in a Box at the time, Scribe Now. And I thought, you know what, this is a perfect opportunity for me to really like pick his brain and prove to him, an expert, that I am not qualified, nor should I be ready to write this book and all that. Well, anyways, long story short, 45 minutes later, and the opposite effect happened. All this culmination of years of thoughts of I should write a book, to having people come to me and saying you should write a book, to now finally talking to someone who can get this done. The long story short here is from that conversation, I made a decision to say, okay, I'm going to do this. I know exactly how to do it. I know exactly who I need to talk to. I know the exact process. Now it's just a matter of time of buckling down and getting it done. And then from that point, it was only probably 4 to 6 months before the entire book was written, published, out there, selling on people's Kindle devices, in people's hands all over the world. And now the rest, as they say, it's history. So it was really a multi-year event that led to one conversation that ended up kind of getting us to where we are right now.
Well, I hope you sit next to me and give me 45 minutes why you can't attract $30,000 and $100,000 clients with very little work, but that's a different story. Sure. Now, when Nich says intentional, he means it. Look at the background that you are looking at with Nich. I mean, he's got a white thumbs up. He's got a white, it looks like a conch shell or something. He's got his books piled up very, I think, in a picturesque way. Right. And his earbuds are red. His microphone stand is red and black. Right. Everything's intentional. He's usually the best dressed guy, you know, at an event. I mean, just dress. I said, be informal today. So this is informal for him.
Informal. Yeah.
He doesn't have a jacket. So, I mean, it's very important when you walk the walk and talk the talk. I know a lot of advertising strategists who don't know how to do it for themselves. They do it for others. And yet when someone does it for themselves, like we do, then intention is a big part of that. So the name of the book, it's a verb, and giving is a verb. And if you stop giving, then you stop growing. And if you stop growing, you start dying. And so Give is by Nicholas Kusmich. I put a little $sign because that's what he's used to getting.
I like that.
Clients and himself. And by the way, those people who didn't email their list and strategic partners and alliances, I'm giving this rather than him paying me $4,500 for this process. I'm giving it to him because I want it as a case study for a forthcoming course. And giving to him doesn't mean Nich will give back, although he will, but giving just means giving to the right people who are relevant to your cause. And that means the right audience, in this case, Facebook. So giving to the wrong group can cause adrenal fatigue, can cause feeling offended, and could cause almost loss of hope. And I'm not being dramatic. You need to know who to give to. So you test, give a little, like little drops of water, then they cascade, and bam, through this breadcrumb navigation, you find your audience. For me, it takes about a month or two. For Nich, probably an hour or two. I mean, he can let us know. But it's through the testing and tracking and observing and keeping score. That's what's different in giving. With Facebook, you keep score. If you give and you keep score with human beings, you're going to be a very unhappy human being. So it's about giving, and it's the verb of giving. But this is a very special book. I've read it, and it's written in such a great way because he has summaries at the end of every chapter. So I read those first, and then I went back and I read through the chapter. Then I read it again and highlighted it, then underlined it. So maybe I'll show you my tattered book. But here is the promise of the book is the subtitle. I love a big one-word title, Give, right? But the ultimate guide using Facebook advertising. Okay, we're not talking LinkedIn. We're not talking Google. We're not talking YouTube. We're talking Facebook advertising. I'm going to challenge him on it in a bit. To generate, and this is automagically really, more leads. Those are prospects. And those are very important people because without prospects, you don't get more clients, which leads to a massive ROI if you have lifetime value. So once you get them, you want to keep them. So this is the most important question because if it doesn't apply to you, then you might as well stop watching now because we have another 30 minutes. But who is the ideal reader, Nich? Who is the ideal reader for the book so that they know they're not going to waste time and it's going to be very relevant for them and their future, possibly their legacy. Because when an ad campaign works, or when Facebook Lives work like I do every single week, man, it's like going to heaven without the inconvenience of dying. So who's the ideal reader?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of ways to look at it, but I think in short, if you are a business owner, and you might not even need to be a business owner per se, you could be the head of a nonprofit, or you just have a message burning deep inside of you that you feel like needs to get out to the world. The message is for, or the book is for anyone who has a message, a product, or a service that could provide value to the person on the other end of that service and is just looking for a faster, more predictable, and reliable way to get that message in front of their ideal prospect. So essentially, if you have a message that needs to be heard, and if that message comes in the form of a product or a service, this book will provide that roadmap. It'll give you the guidance you need to be able to do that, again, reliably and consistently, because a lot of people just say, I know that's what I want to do, I just don't know how to do that. So really, that's who this book was written for.
Well, when that happens, then you don't rely on episodic joint venture partners. You create what a mutual friend of ours calls, Ryan Dice, a customer factory. They just keep coming in again and again. And that's the number one reason for failure in business. They run out of cash because they don't have an ongoing stream of prospects, which lead to clients, which ultimately is ROI. So let's talk about a place to start. Sure. You got to start somewhere. So which page in the book is ideal in Give as a starting point, and why? And I hope your answer is not page 1.
Well, it really depends on where you're at with things. I mean, the first little part of the first section of the book was really written for introducing people to this concept or the power of Facebook. So if you're sitting there thinking, I don't think Facebook can work for me, or I don't think Facebook's a powerful tool for advertising, or I don't think Facebook is all that legitimate as an advertising platform, maybe towards the beginning of the book might be a better idea, because that really sets the groundwork for you to say, okay, well, wait a second, maybe I should consider Facebook as a viable tool to be able to get my message to the world so I can attract more customers on demand. But if you're past all that, I think you could almost bypass the entire first section and start on page 57. And page 57 is really the beginning of my proprietary process that I call the 4 M's, or the predictable profit process. This is where we really start to get into the real strategy of making Facebook work. And just so you can see that is like almost 2/3 or 1/3, maybe almost half through the book. But that is a great place, because this is now going to introduce you to the strategy. This is going to like get into the nitty gritty. And frankly, by the end of each of these chapters, starting from that section there, you're going to get tangible things that you could start to think about and do and apply to start seeing tangible results right away.
Okay, well, here's a confession. I read the book on a flight from San Francisco to Denver to go to a speaker training for yet another mutual friend of ours, Pete Vargas, who's one of the endorsers in the inside cover. Now, truth be told, I did start reading it in the airport, so it took me about 2.5 hours. But if you like to read in the restroom, I would say maybe 5 or 6 sittings, and you are good to go.
Well, depending on if you're clogged up or not. Yeah, it's only a few sittings to get through the entire thing.
Hey, I go before and after, if it's really enticing. Now, before we go into the M's, the 4 M's, and I got to challenge you, because one of the M's that I teach is not even there.
Right.
But before we go into one of the M's, I want to ask you about chapter 2, because we want to set a context. There's a shifting terrain here, and it's shifting, which means movement, right? So things aren't the way they used to be. Facebook wasn't even around when I started. In fact, it was around 10 years after I started. And then when Randy Zuckerberg did her first Facebook Live,
right,
and I think she did it with Katy Perry, that's Mark's sister. When I got a chance to meet her, I said, what was that like? She said it was crazy, because nothing worked like you want it to.
Right.
Kind of like the early days of video. But then now it's such a powerful tool. Now, as you're watching right now, I'm talking to you as you're watching us. I want you to type in any aha. Don't be polite. Type in an aha or take notes in the chat. It's there for you, and see what other people are saying. Let's make this group learning, because why not? We're here in real time. Type in your notes, and if you hear something that you like, instead of writing it down with pen and paper or typing it somewhere else, type it in the chat so we get it on record and we get to have the pulse of you. That's the power of Facebook. And that's one thing you can do with other tools like a webinar, but you can't do it publicly. It democratizes the whole process. So what's the shifting terrain all about?
Yeah, so I believe there's kind of like three areas that we're thinking about when we're thinking shifting terrain. And first is the realization of where attention is actually being spent. So sometimes if I'm speaking on stage, one of the first questions I ask is how many people in this room watch television? And then I make it a little more clear. I say, when we talk about watching television, how many people watch network television on network time versus watching television on demand, whatever show you want, whenever you want it, i.e. Netflix. And the vast majority of people who do in fact watch TV say, well, we obviously watch it on our time rather than network time. And I said, well, for the few of you who do watch it on network time, and keep in mind, we're not talking about professional sports. We realize that there's a time and a place you need to be watching that. But regular shows, those who do watch network time, how many people sit around and actually watch the television commercials? And of course, the vast majority of hands go down. And of course, now that's my time to go to the bathroom or to read a copy of Give while I'm in the bathroom, whatever it be. So first and foremost, we have to realize that the way media, the way attention is currently being consumed and spent has moved away from traditional old forms of media into what I call like new media or new forms of media. I know the next question that I often ask people is how many people are within arm's reach of their cell phone 24 hours a day? The vast majority of the hands go up. How many people, when the first thing you wake up, the thing you grab first, the first thing is your cell phone? The vast majority of the hands go up, right? I then ask, what if you were driving, and how many people watch or look at billboards while they're driving? The obvious answer is no. Most people are, doing this if they're stuck in traffic or whatnot. So the reality is that media attention is shifting. We are consuming content in a completely different way. And I may argue that if you as a business owner do not know how to, as we call it in today's age, stop the scroll, right? When people are just scrolling like a mad person on their mobile phone, if you don't know how to capture attention and stop the scroll on a mobile device, your business could in fact be dying a very slow death. So the first shift that we have to realize is media is being consumed a different way. And that's why sometimes I'll even ask, how many people in here, if you could afford to buy a 30-second television spot for the Super Bowl, extravaganza, a 30-second commercial spot, how many people would spend, let's call it $15,000, $20,000 to get that spot versus the few million that people pay for it right now? The vast majority of hands go up. And I ask, why is that? And there's one real answer. It comes out in multiple different ways, but the one real answer, and exposes the second fallacy of the shifting terrain. They say, well, eyeballs. I just want eyeballs. That's why people spend the millions and millions and millions of dollars on a Super Bowl commercial. And I said, well, what if I could get you the same amount of eyeballs for $20,000? Who's in? And everyone's hands go up. And then I argue the second fallacy of how one should consider advertising in today's day and age. It's the moving away from macro marketing or mass marketing, because the fallacy now is if I can just get exposure, I win. The answer is no, exposure doesn't win anymore. It's exposure of the right eyes and the right ears that wins. So the shift that has to happen is moving away from mass media and onto what I would call micro media or micro marketing. Then when the right people hear and see the right message, then you're going to have far more success. So that's the second fallacy of the shifting terrain. And then I think the third one is that whenever I bring up this idea of advertising, the concept is around, hey, look at my thing and come buy my thing, right? Whether it's a billboard, it's someone carrying a purse, or like essentially saying, buy my thing, or call this number, or come into this place and we'll treat you well. The third part of the shifting terrain is that advertisers used to be takers. And I believe if you really want to make it win, if you want to be an advertiser in today's social day and age, you've got to shift that from saying, what can I take from my customer, to what kind of value can I give or provide to my customer? And if you can understand those three kind of like overarching principles of how the terrain is in fact shifting, if not has already shifted, I think you're best suited to really hit the ground running in making marketing and advertising work for you and your business.
I think that's a very good point. Now, for me, shifting and a shifting terrain comes in three forms. Now, there's a combination of eyes and ears, and that to me is the visual word, which we're doing it on Facebook Live. But then my team, as a gift to you, we're shifting this in just audio, which is just the spoken word. Those are just the ears. And then we're shifting it again by taking a transcript and enhancing it, and that's shifting it to just the eyes. So the combo is video, just ears is spoken, and then just eyes is written. Now, what's interesting is when you look at life that way, we call that repurposing, then you have so many more ways to expose the message, which this virtual book tour doesn't just have to be on Facebook Live, right? It could be on many other platforms, on video, on audio, it could be a podcast, and it also could be an article. But you are going to give them the micromedia that they choose to consume. Some people buy on TV, some people buy through magazines, some people buy in retail. And so if you focus on what's important to them. Another thing is time shifting. I want it when I want it. Now, you mentioned that. Paul Culligan and I wrote a book called the Business Podcasting Bible, of which 95% of it is no longer valid because it was in 2007, and podcasting has changed. Now, time out. Do you notice that you as the viewer, okay, and Nich probably is noticing it right now. It's my first interview, so I'm wondering if he's thinking about this, but I've been dropping a lot of names. Why am I doing that? It's not to impress you. I don't need to do that. You're still watching. It's because on this Facebook Live, we are going to make sure that those names are connected via Facebook to those people so that they know this thing happened, because they'll get a little notice. And my team of content managers and production managers are doing that in the chat, if you've noticed, because they're friends of mine on Facebook. So it's another way to get the message out, and they are bellwethers. They are thought leaders and results leaders who can get the message out. They don't know that this is happening, most of them. So that's why I'm doing it, okay? So that's a shifting of presentation. I just want you to be clear, that's the intention behind it. And then the third intention is if you want to shift a purchase of a book to 99 cents and get it within 60 seconds, that's how fast it takes to get shipped to you, then keep watching, because we're going to show you how to do it. Let's go to chapter 4. By the way, that's called shifting to a tease. Okay, that's an embedded tease, so you keep watching, because this is ethical bribery. Okay, now chapter 4, the first M. What is it, and why do you make it the first? Is there a sequence to this, Nich?
There absolutely is. Everything is thought out with a very specific sequence. And the first M is the market. We're very intentional in starting there, because everything we do from this step forward has to be birthed from the place of the needs of the market. I think many entrepreneurs will come up with like, oh, we came up with this great product idea, or we came up with this great service or whatever. And then they try to find a market to force it into and say, well, here's my thing, come get it. I believe if you can already find a hungry crowd, I think in fact, Gary Halbert said that when he said, what is the number one trick for sales copy that creates conversions? He said, just find a hungry crowd, because then you could feed and there'll be a feeding frenzy. So for us, we are always looking at who is that ideal prospect, that ideal client who wants what you already have, or who did you design this thing for? Who can you give the greatest results to? Now, if I just said that, most people would be like, oh, well, it's for everybody, because entrepreneurs think their solution is for everybody. And that might be the case. But the question I like to ask people all the time is, would you rather be a big fish in a small pond or a small fish in a big pond? And the right answer, even though most people conduct their businesses differently than this, is you rather be a big fish in a small pond. Now, maybe you can be a big fish in multiple small ponds. I'm not suggesting that you're only just a fish in one small pond, but the idea is first we want to identify that small pond or multiple small ponds that we could really start to like tap into, the small ponds that really matter the most. I like to put it this way. I call it your ideal prospect from the perspective of everyone who you own a business. I want you to look at your business now, and I want you to come up with a list of your 3 top customers or your 3 top clients, depending on the type of business that you have. Your 3 top customers or your 3 top clients. And here's how we identify top clients. They paid you the most, they've been with you the longest, and they're the least grief on your customer support. Okay, that identifies to me a great client. So if you could identify those and understand some similarities about them, then you could be like, okay, now I know kind of the people I want to bring into my business, which is, again, the perfect starting point. This is where we need to start. But it doesn't just end there. It's who are they from a 4% perspective? Who are like the ideal prospect that we want to go after? But the second part of this, and why it's so important, is what motivates them to action. Right? Because it's not just good enough to say, these are the people that I really want to go after. The deeper we dive into this idea of what motivates them to action, and I believe that there's only 4 things that motivate someone to action. And I also believe, and I think Phil Jones said this in a book called Exactly What to Say, that the word motivation comes from 2 words: motive, reason, vation, movement. So the reason to move or the reason to act. And so the argument here is that if you can provide the right motivation, you can almost get anybody to do anything, right? You could get a mother who's afraid of heights to traverse the highest of heights to save their baby in a burning building because the motivation was strong enough. So I believe there's 4 motivating factors: fears, frustrations, wants, and aspirations. I call them the 4 forces. And if you can not only identify who your market is, but you start to identify what motivates them, now every other piece, and this is why this M is first, every other piece of everything you do is birthed from that place. The magnets you create to attract them into your business is geared around those motivators. The ads that you write is geared around those motivators. The offers you create are geared around that target group and those motivators, and that's what really starts to drive the difference between mediocre results versus outstanding results.
Well, and there lies the biggest problem as a marketing strategist for over 25 years. I think the biggest challenge and obstacle where people get stuck is they start with what they're going to sell versus who they're going to sell it to. You can't sell hamburgers to vegetarians. Now, I'm looking at the book, and the promise is, generating more leads, more clients, and massive ROI. You could have called this book more, but give is a much better word because it's not an adjective, it's a verb. And that brings us to the 3rd M. And I want to know, what is it? What's the 3rd M? And more importantly, why not media? I mean, you've left out media. That's not one of the 4 M's. Okay. Yeah. Why not media? Give it to us.
The 3rd M is magnet. And why is a media not one of the M's? Because I believe the media is neutral. And so what I mean by that is the platform you choose to get the medium out there, right, is in my opinion, almost irrelevant because mediums come and go. I mean, if I was a MySpace strategist a few years ago, I'd be in big trouble because I don't have a business anymore, right? So media is important, yes. And of course, we talk about Facebook as the media, and we're probably going to talk about why Facebook is better than all other media. But frankly, if you chose the right media, but you didn't have your market nailed down, the 1st M, and you don't have the right magnet, which is the 3rd M, which is what we're talking about now, all of it is for naught, right? The media is neutral, but you need to have these strategies in place to be able to capitalize on the forms of media. So the 3rd M is magnet. And our industry calls that a lead magnet, but essentially in my mind, it's what do you give now that ideal market in exchange for a conversation? Now, we call that lead building. And usually the conversation is, hey, let me give you something in exchange for an email address so I could take you onto a platform and continue to provide value for you. But the idea here is, now that I know exactly who you are, and now that I know exactly what motivates you to action, how can I create bite-sized pieces of micro content in the form of a magnet that's going to help move that needle for you? Remember, the title of the book is Give. What are we giving? We are giving solutions. We are giving value. We are giving results in advance so that I believe the greatest sales driver, the greatest sales force to create a transaction, at least in today's day and age, is your ability to outgive your competition. It's your ability to prove your ability to help someone. And through that helping of someone, they come back to you and say, well, can I get more help? Because you're the only one who didn't just promise me you could help me. You actually helped me. There's a novel idea where we don't promise people we can help them. We actually help them. And then when they get the help, most of the time, and here's what I found, and maybe you'd agree, Alex, is that when you help someone, the next question they ask is typically, what's next? Thank you for helping me. What's next? And as an entrepreneur who has a product or a service to provide a market, those are the two of the most beautiful words you can hear. What's that? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Let me show you how I can help you. So to me, the magnet is the best way to go about this is think about your market, think about what motivates them to action, think about the stated problems that they are talking about in their marketplace, the itches that they want scratched. And then again, rather than promising you're going to help them, give them the thing to alleviate the itch, help them move one step closer to their goal, give them a result in advance, as Frank Kern used to call them, right? Give those things first. Watch them develop the confidence muscle. Watch them develop this trust in you. Watch them develop this trust in themselves in the process. And the more you could give in that process, the more you tend to see in return. So Magnet is all about let's provide value to attract our ideal people and prove that we can help them in advance of actually charging them to help them even further.
Well, Nick, I'm glad you mentioned Frank Kern because now he'll get a mention that shows up on his Facebook, and then that'll be good. So I hope you watch this, Frank, and I miss you. It's been too long. One thing that's remarkable for me, and it's a takeaway for me right now, Facebook is not even mentioned on the cover. I mean, you wouldn't even know this is about Facebook, which really shows the neutrality or how agnostic the media is.
Right.
And I'm starting to believe that because I didn't believe that at first, and I'm not 100% a believer in that. So I'm going to challenge you on media. Well, it doesn't matter as much. I believe it does matter, but it's not the message. That's for sure. So I'm almost there. Maybe you'll get me in the next 5 minutes that we have. Now, as you're watching this with Nick and me, okay, if you've kept on watching, I'm glad you're here because I want you to type in your biggest takeaway. Some people call them ahas. If English is not your primary language, most of the people from my tribe are from outside of North America. Don't worry. The best way to be fluent in a language is to type in takeaways, especially on Facebook. Now, I'm not asking to do props because if you're reading this, type in your biggest takeaway underneath the blog in the comments. If you're listening to this, type in a biggest takeaway, maybe in the form of a review on iTunes. You know, why does it have to be a review for a podcast? It can be a review for a specific episode. And then I think we deserve 5 stars, but that's simply up to you. And that goes for Amazon as well. So you see, by the shifting terrain, I can't always say, give me some hearts, give me some thumbs up, give me some props, because that's not relevant to the reader or the listener. And this is going to be shifted into those 2 other media, not just video. Keep that in mind. You'll notice that I also speak with pictures. This is for you with Facebook Live. If you do them, and I want you to do them, is I don't say, look at this. What's the reader going to think? Or what's the listener going to say? I say, in my hand, I have the book Give. And here is the promise, the ultimate guide to using Facebook advertising. Well, there's Facebook actually, but I missed it to generate more leads, more clients, and massive ROI. Nick, you can interrupt me at any time if I ever get it wrong, because I'm wrong 50% of the time. So give us your biggest takeaway. We call it pack my bag moments. You could just pack your bags and leave right now, but you're not, because you know good stuff is coming. So Nick insinuated this, and it was my next card. Why Facebook? Is Facebook going to be around? How do we know it's not going to be another MySpace? Why have you put so much investment into Facebook? And by the way, as you're watching right now, I'm not talking to Nick. As you're watching, assuming you don't have the budget to hire Nick. Now, this is a lead generator for Nick, this book, right? But assuming you cannot hire Nick to suck that out of his brain and have him do it for you. Well, how about do it yourself, not for $997, not for $99, not even for $9, but how about 99 cents? That's a nice shifting progression, right? 99 cents to be kind of, the thing in the dental office, only you're doing it out of his brain. And this is the final version, okay? And this came from a place with Tucker Max and his team. So I know in the reviews and how they revised it, I know the quality that Tucker puts out because he's a good friend of mine, and now he's getting pinged. So I can't wait for him to see this. He may be watching live. So why Facebook, Nick?
So I like Facebook because I call it the paradox of size. So on the one hand, Facebook is it's huge. I mean, if you see it, I don't know what the last numbers are. I should have picked them up before we had this conversation. Let's call it like 3 billion active monthly users. It's in and around there at some point. theoretically, that's like half the world's population, if that even makes sense. But the point of the matter is your audience, no matter who they are, no matter what you do, no matter what you sell, is most likely on Facebook or a Facebook property, right? Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, all that stuff. So the sheer size of being able to reach just about anybody is totally attractive. It's like the Super Bowl, but on steroids and for pennies on the dollar versus the millions that you got to pay to reach them. Now, if that's all Facebook was, I still believe that it would be the best medium to run advertising on, but that's not all that this is. More than the bigness of Facebook is the opposite, and that's the smallness of Facebook. That's why, again, I call it the paradox of size. It's big, but it's huge. And so it's big, but it's small. What do I mean by small? I mean that if you wanted to, you could target a woman between the ages of 29 and 32 who lives in Beverly Hills, California, who shops at Whole Foods, reads romance novels, and spent $1,000 on her Amex card last week. Now, I don't know why you would, but you could. So besides being this massive social media platform that they publicly present themselves as, I believe Facebook is the greatest data aggregator in the entire world. They know everything about us. They know more about us than we know about ourselves. How do I know? I woke up this morning and I looked at my Facebook and it reminded me what I had for lunch 3 years ago. I mean, 3 years ago, it reminds me what I ate because supposedly 3 years ago, it was in to take a picture of what you eat and put it on Facebook. But the point is, it knows when we check into places, when we're traveling, how long we've been there, who our friends are, what we like, etc. It knows where we work. I mean, we publicly give this information to Facebook and then Facebook takes it, puts it in their quote unquote matrix, which is now available to any intelligent advertiser and say, excuse me, Facebook, can you show my message? Because I know enough about my ideal prospect that I need to target. I say, can you show my message to this type of person? And we lay out the parameters, and now Facebook can micro target that specific individual or that group of people, and say, this is it, come look at it. So why Facebook? There is no other platform in the world currently that can get you that kind of size and smallness at the same time for the cost it costs. I mean, we're super spoiled to be living in today's day and age.
No, it's true. And, you know, that just triggered something in my mind. I lived in Manhattan on 63rd Street between York and First. That's in the Upper East Side. And Manhattan is the only island I know that's about 11 miles long and 3.5 miles wide. Has nearly 4 billion people, a million, not billion, 4 million people living there. And yet when you live there, you see the same people every single day. They take the same path back from the subway. They eat in the same fiefdom in the same restaurant. You see them at the dry cleaner. You see them at the movies because everyone goes to the same place. At the rent-a-car, because you don't own a car in Manhattan, at least I didn't. We go to the same Avis rent-a-car place. So that's what Facebook is you have this macro, but the micro is there because we're kind of hanging out with the same congregation. In this case, it's proximity. Let me bring some heart into this. What you just said, Facebook reminds you of things. Not long ago, I got a picture of someone who I offended 5 years ago. It was unintentional. It was at an event, and that event was one of the springboards to him launching a $100 million business. And we haven't talked to each other since. And I saw that and I said, wow. And we were happy. I could remember it like it was yesterday. Facebook just gave us the picture. And it was way before I was doing Facebook Live. So I sent it to him. And he called me back. He called me on the phone within 10 minutes. And it's like, we've started a brand new relationship, you know. Now, unintentionally offending someone, I'm sure it's happened to you if you're watching, but that's what Facebook did, is by knowing my behavior and by knowing where I was, it got to reconnect with a friend that, frankly, I missed. And I was angry at, you know, I have my faults, but then that picture changed it all because it was nostalgic, which is such a powerful thing that can win the heart. And if you win the heart, the ego of the head follows. Before we go into the bad news, which is the obstacles, that this doesn't work for everybody. People, you know, have roadblocks. They hit a brick wall. Facebook doesn't work. I've spent a bunch of money. It doesn't work. There's some mystery or magic. What does Nich do? some other advertisers, what are they doing to make money? I'm not making money. I've been doing it for a year. I'm not making money. I'm sure if that's you, and no matter how much you've spent, stick around because we're going to talk about obstacles. But before the bad news, that could be good news because we'll show you how to get through them. How about the good news? The good news is how to get the Kindle version that's been dropped down to 99 cents. Now, if you're watching this many weeks past the live promotion, or if you're reading this or listening to this, it may not be 99 cents. Okay, so don't hold our feet to the fire. But if you're watching it at the right time, and if you paid attention, if you've gotten here through Nick's influence on Facebook or mine on Facebook and through my email list, then go to Beyond Book Sales, because it's beyond the book sale, right? beyondbooksales.com/give. Now, where does that go? That goes directly to the Kindle page, and you'll see this magical 99 cents. Now, if you don't see the 99 cents, it's going to be less than $10. And if you hear a dog barking in the background, that's because Minnie, my dog, who Nick has met, is very excited about this offer because she's never heard a book this valuable for 99 cents. So it's 99 cents. Now, the reason you get that book for 99 cents is because we go deeper in a bonus webinar, which Nick will be gifting you. And in order to get access to it, you give a certified review. Now, how can you get a certified review? You have to buy the book on Amazon. Well, can you buy the Kindle version? Of course you can. Can you buy it at 99 cents and give a certified review? Yes, you can. Certified reviews have meaning on Amazon. Now, what do you give to Nick with a certified review, especially if it's 5 stars? We can't force that, but read a chapter or just read the summaries and then just give your vote and rate it with your review. Well, what happens is once you get over 100 5-stars reviews, and we may be there already, then all of a sudden Jeff Bezos' algorithm kicks in and give shows up everywhere. So you give to Nick and he'll give back to you a webinar that will be, it's a bonus, that will dig even deeper into this topic. Now, do I know what the topic is going to be? I don't, because I didn't ask him. But you know it's going to be good. And when you know what he puts out without me interrupting him, it's going to be 100% him. So you'll get pure him, unalloyed of Alex. My job is to guide from the side and get you to say yes. If it sounds like I want you to buy the book, I do. Why? Because I want this virtual book tour to be wildly successful. Let's talk about the obstacles. We would not be responsible. We won't have the ability to respond if we don't normalize obstacles. What can readers expect to get in the way of the book's promise? What if there's obstacles to getting leads, to getting clients, to getting a massive ROI, mostly getting leads? Okay, what are the obstacles you've observed?
Well, I think the first obstacle is pretty apparent, and that's those who buy the book and do nothing with it. In other words, they buy the book, they don't read it, or they buy the book and they don't do anything with it. So I think the greatest obstacle, and one of the most difficult to overcome, frankly, is actually just doing something with it. I mean, how many times have we bought a book or a course or listened to a podcast or heard Alex and he gave us some great advice about something that we should do in our next Facebook Live, and we thought, yeah, I'll get to that. And then we do our next Facebook Live and we don't do it, or we don't even do the Facebook Live in the first place. So it's the same sort of thing. I think getting started is probably the hardest obstacle to overcome. But once you can get going, and part of that, let me just tie in, like, to trust the process. I mean, I've spent the millions. I've gone through the heartache. I've been through the trenches on your behalf, and I've kind of laid it all out in a very small book here for you to be able to, like, just take the principles and apply them and use them so you don't have to make the same mistake. So obstacle number one is not getting started. And I sincerely ask, because more, if you're not going to do anything with the book, maybe don't even buy it or gift it to someone or someone. But I ask from my heart, if you'll just take it and find that, like, takeaway experience, that thing where you just kind of like walk away with it and say, boom, I'm good. I got it. All good. That's kind of the first thing that you want to do, right? So obstacle number one, getting started. Then once you get started, it's a matter of not giving up. I think a lot of people, what is it? There's a book that talks about 3 feet from gold, right? I think it's Think and Grow Rich. Think and Grow Rich talks about how they're digging and mining for gold.
That was just about 100 miles north of me. They stopped mining, and they had the mining equipment sold back to the mining equipment company, and they went and they kept digging. Go ahead and tell the story.
Well, so it's just crazy because like they were digging and digging and digging and looking for gold. And then they just got to this point where they stopped. They said, you know what, there's no gold here. And so they stopped literally 3 feet from gold. They gave that back all the shovels and they moved on, and those guys went and they ended up finding it. But the case in point here is I think a lot of people give up early, whether they're frustrated or it's not getting the results they want, or I heard all these things. And look, oftentimes it's just a matter of tweaks. Or getting expert opinion or getting feedback or just trying and being in the trenches a little bit before you get that result, right? So the second obstacle I would say is just not seeing it through. And then the third obstacle, believe it or not, is coasting. So I've seen a lot of people, a lot of our students who've gone through our stuff and they get great results like a home run right out of the big eights. And they're like, yeah, I got this. This is so easy. And then all of a sudden a block comes in their way, or the second campaign isn't as successful as their first, or whatever it be. Or they kind of like coast for a little while and then they get lazy. The reality is Facebook's an ever-changing platform. I mean, people who were advertising on this 3 years ago might not be advertising on it today because they got lazy and the times passed and they didn't go along with those times. And here's the truth. Is marketing on Facebook difficult? You best sure damn believe it is. Anything that's worth doing is difficult. Now, it's simple, but it's not easy. So it's difficult. You got to do it. You got to do the work. And then you got to stay on top of it because the times are going to change and Facebook's going to change an algorithm. And then you have two choices. You can bitch and complain and say, oh my God, Facebook changed an algorithm. I quit. Or you pull up your big boy pants and you say, I'm going to figure this new one out and figure the new one out and figure the new one out. So the reality is, do not have unrealistic expectations. Know that this is a process, but with the right plan in place, you could get to that journey faster than you would normally. Stick it through, get started, then stick it through, then test and figure out, get expert opinion, and then don't just coast, but stay sharp, stay relevant, stay on top of the thing, because I guarantee you it's worth it. But most people just kind of fall a little short. So I think if you can overcome those obstacles of releasing those expectations of thinking it's going to be a home run tomorrow, sticking true with it, I think you'll end up seeing the results that you're looking for.
Nick, I'm going to go back to your old job and tell you something you heard a lot. Amen. Amen. All right. So let me tell you what to do next. Now, those of you who are marketers, especially the really smart ones, you're going to say, Alex, these are 2 call to actions. I disagree. It's 1 call to action with 2 parts, part A and part B. So part A is get the Kindle version for 99 cents. We wanted it at a no-brainer, even lower than most iTunes songs price. He put his heart and soul in this thing for 99 cents. Why? Well, you go to beyondbooksales.com/give, whether you're listening, reading, or watching. And I'll tell you why in a moment. The reason it's 99 cents to give back. No, you don't have to, but if you gave back to Nick, he'll give you a bonus webinar, just him, that'll dig even deeper, and he will gift it to you with a certified review. And the only way to do that is to buy the Kindle version. You can get the physical book as well. In fact, I recommend you get 2 books. You get the Kindle version for you and get a book for someone who's lost hope in Facebook marketing, and let Nick do the heavy lifting. Give him a physical version. Come on, it's less than $20, right? And if you do this within 24 hours, we'll keep track and we will invite you to a webinar and we will keep track. And if we want to know what you're saying, what's your biggest takeaway, keep typing. I'm going to do what I call a review rampage. So here we go, really quick, and then I'll go back to Nick for the final word. So we started with the title, Give, by Nich Kusmich, and hopefully you love him by now, okay? He not only knows how to speak, he knows what to say, and he'll meet you at your level. You don't have to be a tech genius. You don't have to be a marketer, okay? You can be a pastor, and you can get this done. Next, the promise is the ultimate guide to using Facebook advertising. That's what FB is. I'm holding a card in my hand to generate more leads, more clients for massive return on investment. That's what clients lead to, but you need prospects first. Who is the ideal reader? He mentioned different levels. You could be an expert. You can be someone who's tried and it hasn't worked on Facebook, or you're just starting out and you want to get that constant flow so that you're not relying on joint ventures or face-to-face sales. Which page is the ideal place to start and why? Well, you can go back to the beginning and get Nick's answer, but he said depends where you're at. For me, the best place to start is every review at the end of each chapter. You would have read the essence, the nectar of the book in less than 10 minutes. Shifting terrain, chapter 2. Why is it important? Because it's happening. And the only thing worse than going in the wrong direction is going in the wrong direction enthusiastically. Chapter 4, the first M. That's market. Why is it first? First who, then what? You can't sell hamburgers to vegetarians. Chapter 6. And by the way, that's so important because it doesn't matter how beautiful your ads are. It doesn't matter what your video is. It doesn't matter what your ads say. It doesn't even matter what problem you're solving. If it's not relevant to the market or the audiences you're going after, then Facebook will not reward you with a return on investment. Think audiences first, then everything else. If I've spoken out of turn, Nick can have the last word. The third M is magnet. We're not pushing people away. We're shepherding. In this case, we're not even going to touch them until they're ready to come to us. Forget the hungry crowd with selling them hamburgers. Go for the starving crowd, right? So the third M is magnet. And the reason why it's not media, because media is agnostic, meaning it doesn't really matter what the media is. It will shift from time to time. I'm sure one day there won't be a Facebook, but if you know the 4 M's, then no matter what, you'll be successful. And then the key question is, why Facebook? Fastest, easiest, most economical way to make things work, as long as, wait for it, you know your first M. That's enough reason to spend 99 cents on a book and then pay under 20 bucks to give the book as a gift to somebody else. And then the obstacles, the biggest one is not getting started. You just see this and you go, okay, cool, I can't wait. And then you become an over-motivated underachiever. This is the time to begin. Nick, you got the final word. I'm going to put you on the big screen. Go for it.
Well, I mean, I think the final word is just kind of like tailing off what to Alex mentioned there. It's very easy to consume content. It's very easy to learn new concepts. It's very easy to have great motivations and great ideas and great intentions, but all of it is for naught until you actually do something with it. You hear it all the time, over and over and over again. But I think more than anything, if you'll take even just one snippet, one backpack takeaway, just one element that you could apply today, and you apply it, and then you find another one tomorrow, and then another one tomorrow, rather than coming up with a perfect plan and figuring out, I've got to do all this in the next 3 weeks. Let's come up with one thing that you could do in the next 48 hours, do it, get the result, then do another thing for the next 48 hours and continue to move forward, and the progress will pay great, great dividends in the end.
All right. Well, as you see us side by side, I'm the guy from the side. I'm Alex Mandossian. The sage from today's stage is Nich Kusmich. And if you just refuse to get the Kindle version or the physical book, then type in some takeaways inside the Facebook Live or where you're reading this article or where you're listening, no matter what type of media you may be consuming from. Give us some feedback so we can improve, okay? That goes for me, and then I'll pass that on to Nick as well, because ultimately it's going to fine-tune who his audiences are all about. All right, Nick, on behalf of you and your team, I'm Alex Mandossian, and Beyond the Book Sale is all about you not only consuming it, but applying it, and just close that learning, doing gap. All good wishes.